Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm going to go through a little bit of a thought exercise with you. By the way, if somebody says we're going to do a thought exercise, that person's a douche, right? I think that's how it goes. So, guilty as charged. Anyway, to me, this is a conundrum of the comic industry and how it's operating today, and why we have an inherent problem with the larger companies, DC, Marvel. I'm not going to say Image, but the larger companies. I think there's a paradox that gets created by editors and by people in Marvel and DC, where they basically have a lot of the creators, and we're going to start with the writers. I'll get to the artists in a minute, but first off, the writers, where everyone is on an incredibly short leash. And what that means is like, come in, do a pitch, 5, 10 issues. That's what we've got. And then if it sells well, we'll give you more. The problem with that is that if you're a creator and you're at all smart as a writer, you're going to look at that statement of, hey, we're going to basically kind of give you 5, 10 issues at a time. And that's how we're going to run your contract and your longevity in this company. But don't worry, wink, we love you and we hope you'll do great. The challenge with that is if you're a smart writer, you will look at it this way. Cool. So I'm going to get this contract with this big two company. I'm going to write a character that's more nationally known. My objective here is to make a name for myself. My objective is not to make the greatest comic in the world. It's not to really knock it out of the park. It's to basically get on my resume. They call it get a line on a resume. It's basically get a line on my resume that I wrote a big two comic. That's all it is. And so when you're doing that, you're writing more or less for yourself, and not even like a good for yourself. People will do things for themselves out of glory, out of wanting to be remembered forever, out of lots of things. But when you're writing for the ability to have a line on your resume, on your CV, then that's not exactly world-renowned glory. It's checking a box. So either people think like that, and they're not mutually exclusive. This could be an or they're thinking about it in terms of, well, I'm going to put out a story and I'm going to try and, come up with really great ideas. But here's the problem. If you have a really great idea that can be told in a 5 to 10 issue story, in other words, a limited series, are you going to give that idea away to Marvel or DC? And the answer is no. 95% of the writers will never do it that way. They will keep the good idea for themselves. And what they're going to do is very quickly come to the conclusion of, I'm going to work for Marvel. I'm going to get a series out. I'm going to get a good idea. I'm not going to waste it on Marvel, but I'm going to try and get up enough credibility for myself that I can go take it to Image or somewhere else and then, run the comic as mine with my great idea. And then I'll be able to keep the IP, keep more of the value of it, and maybe it gets turned into a TV show or whatever else. But this entire process is fundamentally flawed. It's flawed because the big two are giving you, as a writer, zero incentive to actually swing, for a home run and do a really good job. Instead, your objective is, how can I make a Spider-Man story that, might sell well for Marvel, but really it's like junk food. It doesn't need to have any long-term consequences. And if it does, and it breaks the universe or breaks the characters, I don't really need to worry about it because it's not my problem. It's Marvel's. So maybe you write a story about Spider-Man, let's say, and you're like, okay, I want to get a bunch of attention for my story. So I'm going to tease the fact that he's together with Mary Jane, but I'm going to go ahead and, break the status quo by having Spider-Man dates some rando woman from a prison, and I'm going to put Mary Jane together with some interdimensional douchebag with a man bun, and that's my comic. And the controversy over this, there will be people who absolutely hate it. At this point, by the way, if you're with Marvel, and I understand Tom Brevoort's fighting this, but Brevoort just is a fool who is so consumed by sucking up to the people at Marvel that he doesn't understand that he's digging his own grave as a long-term career in comics. But, You know that the vast majority of Marvel fans want to see Spider-Man and Mary Jane together, either in a relationship or married. And so you're doing these titles that are going to intentionally antagonize the fans and get people talking about the comic, which thus raises the profile, which helps the line on your resume, which means that when you take your great idea, which, spoiler alert, it usually isn't that great an idea, but, you may think it is, over to Image, you'll have a little bit more buzz because you're the infamous writer that wrote the story about how Mary Jane is fucking some douchebag Paul, and that's what you get. All what I'm saying is there's incentives throughout this entire process, but none of those incentives line up to creating the great long-term book that is going to sell and be remembered and amazing. When Craven's Last Hunt was created, a story that dealt with suicide, it dealt with Craven the Hunter, and it basically killed off one of Spider-Man's long-term villains and was very psychological and everything else. If you think about it, that was a fearless story, meaning, the consequence of killing Craven, we didn't have the revolving door of death at the Marvel Universe. Dead, yeah, it didn't completely mean dead, but it usually meant dead. That was what was going on in comics. And so the idea that you're going to kill off a major character, a major villain, a minor villain, medium villain, I don't know. You pick. That was more brave. Today, the idea of just kind of tweaking the fans to get attention in the hopes of building up your own resume of work, that's a very different thing. And, to make matters, slightly worse, or, depending on how you look at it, now you look at the artists, and the artists are sitting around just wanting a decent payday somewhere along the line. And they are tethered to trying to buddy up with artists in order to get a chance to showcase their skills. But the comic publishers, the big two anyway, have eliminated the inker. And so they're going to pay you to do all in one, but the dollar amount doesn't add up. And your motivation as an artist is to create commissions that you can sell original art for. So your hope is to get onto a book or have a comic where, Deadpool or Wolverine guest star, and you're going to draw a panel that, a page that's really going to try and highlight that so you can sell some original art and, get some commissions. And but generally you're tethered to writers who, for all intents and purposes are also in bad shape in terms of their longevity. So the whole thing, all the incentives are wrong in comics. All the incentives are for short-term gains. They are not for long-term value building. Everybody is just kind of, I hate the expression, moving the chairs around on the Titanic, but that's a little bit of what it is. The reason why I hate that as an analogy is comics is not like that Titanic. It's more like a tiny little tugboat. It's too small for anybody to really care about if it sinks. And it's also fairly protected in that it won't sink, but it's also nothing anybody gets excited about either. And yet it's creating the ideas and the characters and the IP that is going to be the future of a lot of comics. So, I mean, it's in a horribly bad, awkward place where as a business, as the creators, as everyone involved, it's stuck. It's in I use the word arrested development a lot in this channel, but it's really, truly in a state of trapped. It can't really evolve forward. The incentives, and I mean here financially, are not there for the creators to put their best work. I mean, shit, if you're a writer and you have a really great idea for a 6-issue story that would be powerful and poignant and have character development, you're going to, why in the world would you waste that on a Marvel or a DC that will not care? Maybe you get a great name off of it, but more than likely, I mean, and here's the thing, Marvel, more than DC, but both companies at different times, but certainly Marvel, has shown every indication that if you are very successful, they will punish you to some extent. You may get work, but they're going to be increasingly resentful of you and may actively work against you. So if you have a great idea, you'd be insane not to go do it yourself. And everybody knows this at this point. So the ideas that we're getting in the mainstream comics are filler ideas. And worse, they're filler ideas against characters that they don't own. So there doesn't really, there it really isn't any responsibility to keep things moving at any kind of pace. And the artists are, trying to basically get work that helps them financially, but they're adrift with this whole process. And the motivation for them also is, hey, the big money's in covers, so try and get popular enough, good enough that you can get into doing covers, and then you could sell those covers as original art. Like, that's the game. Meanwhile, there's an increasing funnel and pipeline to get people from South America or Europe to do the work for cheaper. And all of this spells it's a bad system. The people who are the full-time employees, the FTEs, the editors, the people in the management positions, the big two, the editors are overworked and underpaid for the amount of books they're processing. And again, they're not rewarded on quality and success. They're rewarded on throughput. And the management is just desperate to keep their job. Look, I mean, and I don't mean to pick on this guy. I'm sure he's delightful, but if you're CB Cebulski or you're Tom Brevoort, your motivation is to just to hold on to that chair as long as you can. Unless you're a complete fool, and I know Tom Brevoort's worried about this. I mean, I've heard directly Tom Brevoort's worried about this. Cebulski, I'm assuming, is worried about this. They know their positions are very tenuous. They probably, when the big changes happen at Marvel, Brevoort walks around paranoid he's about to get fired. And that's a state of mind because they've got, decent salaries for what they do. Some of these people, if you get up to the David Gabriel level, are overpaid for what they do. And their biggest fear is the gravy train ends. And what is the job after this one? I'm bad news, folks. It's not great. What do you think you're going to get a, head of commercial or distribution job at Pfizer? Are you kidding me? You're going to get a cush job at Penguin Random House. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a career. The average tenure there is 25 years for people. You think you're going to wander over from Marvel, a group that everyone knows is propped up by Disney, and somebody's going to give you a high 6-figure job at those companies? It's not going to happen. So you're just trying to hang on to your job as long as you can. And that means don't take risks, don't upset the apple cart, and be genuinely paranoid about what you do. I say all this because if you understand the business of comics and where people are all at, it's entertaining when I hear people going, the folks at Marvel are all sitting around trying to figure out how to insert communist storylines into the Avengers. It's like, that's nice. It's very cute. It's very naive and it's dumb, but that's not the core problem of comics. The core problem of comics is what I just described. The incentives are all wrong. It's a business that is upside down in terms of business logistics, and it just is. So if you want to save comics, if you want to help comics, if you want to grow comics, you're going to have to figure out a way to break that cycle. And ultimately, probably it starts at the top, but that's a tough, thing to unwind. Everything I just described is very entrenched. And in order to get any business to fundamentally change, you've got to have business incentive to do it. And too many of the people in comics do not. And the moral of the story is, good luck. I hope you enjoy Mary Jane as Venom. Awesome. Thanks for listening.